Hi, my name is Eric. Welcome back to my channel. Happy New Year! Let's talk once again about Tori Amos. Today, as you requested, I'm going to react to her 1996 album Boys for Pele and break down the album's lyrics. Before I dive in, let me know in the comments down below what Tori Amos album I should react to next. I think for now you've been saying that I should continue in chronological order, but let me know what you think. Check the description box for a link to a list of nonprofits you can donate to. Please subscribe to be here when I post new videos every week and hit the bell icon to be notified when my videos go live. This is a pretty long album at 18 tracks, so I'm going to pair songs and listen to them and analyze them together just so that I don't end up making an egregiously long video, and I'm not going to talk about the deluxe tracks, which are mostly just live versions and demos anyway. And just a couple more things before I get into it. I'm not going to be able to cover every single detail from every possible angle. This is just what I'm seeing at first listen, so I encourage you to leave your own interpretations in the comments. I also won't really be focusing a whole lot on biographical details of Tori's life, but if you find them relevant, I also invite you to leave those in the comments. And lastly, Tori's music, just even from what I've heard from her first two albums, deals a lot with issues of gender and oppression and especially sexual assault, so if those things are hard for you to listen about, I just wanted to give you the heads up right now before we get into the album. All that being said, without further ado, track number 1 is Beauty Queen and Horses, and track number 2 is Blood Roses.
She's a beauty queen. Hey, my sweet baby. Don't know why she's in my hand. I got me some horses to ride on, to ride on. Your demons can go there as long as you're on me. It keeps perfectly still.
This is so cool.
You'll find me a sailor, a tailor, and maybe together we'll make Malua. So I chased down your posies, your pansies, and my horses. So I got me some horses to ride on, to ride on. It keeps perfectly still.
Such a haunting melody and vocal performance, has the same sort of stirring quality as Precious Things. Ooh, is that a harpsichord?
Blood roses by the street now. When chickens get a taste, you're me, girl. When chickens get a taste, you're me, yeah. You gave him your blood and your warm little down. He likes killing you after you died. God knows I know I've thrown away those graces. Come on, 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 come on. Sometimes you're nothing but me.
Wow. Chills. Oh my gosh, that was so good. So much going on there instrumentally and melodically. I love her compositions so much, and she really is going even more out there with her vocals. She is centering her vocals even more. I think they are farther forward in the mix even than on her last two albums. At least it sounds that way to me right now. She's playing more with her breath and with the texture of her voice. It's just so fun to listen to. And so the first track was split into two halves, and on the fairly brief Beauty Queen half, she talks about this Beauty Queen character who she compares to a beanbag, basically an object that people sit on and mold to their shape. She's basically describing a woman who's being objectified and hollowed out and used. And then she ends that half of the song with the Beauty Queen being in her hand. So Tori is in power, and now she has the responsibility of deciding what to do with that power. And to me, this is extending some of the ideas that Tori explored on Under the Pink, specifically about how women treat each other. So the question now is, will Tori treat this Beauty Queen figure as an object too? And then we transition into horses, where the scenario is basically Tori is riding these horses away from an army on her heels and away from her demons. For me, the image of the horses brings to mind the song Winter from Little Earthquakes, which, as you probably could tell, was one of my favorites from that album. And on that song, Tori had this image of these white horses still being in bed. And what I think she was describing with this image of the horses asleep was sort of her latent potential that she had as a child, and now she has grown up and the horses are awake. And so on the second verse, she says, maybe I'll find me a sailor, a tailor, and maybe together we'll make mother well. These are adult concerns, finding someone to marry and to help provide for her family. So the horses have evolved from a symbol of her untapped potential as a child to a vehicle for her to escape from or to overcome the realities of the adult world. And then the third verse has these images of flowers, and she says, I chase down your posies, your pansies in my hosies. Posies are a flower associated with death, like in the song Ring Around the Rosie, and hosies are underwear. This feels like an image of her losing her virginity or something like that, but the presence of the posies feels like an acknowledgement of mortality that's a little bit more complicated than a line like, things are going to change, like on Winter. I could go on, but that half of the track is basically about moving into adulthood and the complications that come with that. And in that way, Blood Roses is pretty similar because even just the title, you have roses, which are a symbol of romance, and then, blood, which is blood. And this is extra clear on the second verse when she says, you gave him your blood and your warm little diamond. He likes killing you after you're dead. The blood can just generally be about giving yourself over to someone in an intimate way, but if we carry over the virginity idea from the last song, then it gets a little bit more explicit. So she's basically saying that this representative man will take beyond what a woman can give, particularly in the bedroom. And then she seems to face some emotional repercussions from this experience on the bridge when she says, God knows, I know, I've thrown away these graces. She feels like she's given up God's grace. As some of you pointed out to me, Tori had a pretty religious upbringing, and with that can often come a lot of shame and stigma around sexuality, and particularly around virginity. And then we get even more of that gender dimension in the last line when she says, sometimes you're nothing but meat. So just like the beauty queen beanbag on the opener, she feels like an object. Track number 3 is Father Lucifer, and track number 4 is Professional Widow. I have seen a few of you mention Professional Widow in comments before, specifically with relation to Tori's dating life, I think. Again, that's not going to be super important to my analysis, but if you want to elucidate some details or references in this song, feel free to do so. Definitely some Baroque feelings on this album.
Father Lucifer, you never look so sane. You always did prefer the drizzle to the rain. How the Lizzies, how's your Jesus Christ been hanging?
Oh, is that a crucifixion pun?
It's gonna stop me from floating. He says I run and then I run from him and then I run. It's gonna stop me from floating. Days, my week last year, the baby's still in your heat. Say you're a skilly dee dying.
That's very Kate Bush sounding. Nice. I like this genre of harpsichord rock. Okay.
Make him feel like a congressman. Running in a family. How? It's running a family. Rest your shoeless beaches and cream. Brown
That was a lot, and all of it was good. That was an experience. Wow. But before I talk about Professional Widow, I have to return to Father Lucifer, which sort of expanded on horses by talking a bit more about the process of escaping life's evils. Just like she said before that she would use these horses to escape her demons, on the second verse of Father Lucifer, she says, I run and then I run from him. Him, of course, being Lucifer, the devil, the embodiment of evil. And then on the chorus, she's a bit more defiant. She says, nothing's gonna stop me from floating. Floating could be just generally like an image of freedom, like flying, or it can be specifically about going to heaven. Either way, she's basically saying, the world's ills won't keep me down. Underneath it all, of course, is this issue of gender. The devil, of course, is masculinized, and he's in love with a milkmaid. Milk, of course, being a classic image of motherhood and femininity. So just like on Blood Roses, there are all of these forces in the world working against Tori, and they kind of all boil down to these gender roles and power dynamics. And then Professional Widow is even more explicitly about patriarchy, specifically about how it poisons a family. She has this amazing refrain, which she performs in such an incredible way, where she says, running in the family, it's running a family. I absolutely love that line. Running in the family, of course, means that these things are inherited. These gender roles are passed down through the family. But these gender roles also run families. They structure how we think about and live our family lives. You know, in that way it's self-affirming. And of course, on the song, she illustrates these roles. So when she talks about men, she brings up stags, congressmen, celebrities, boxers, and Judas. So basically we've got breeding, leadership or power, and violence. She also ties this idea to economics on the chorus when she talks about selling a baby and striking a deal, basically, you know, sacrificing the next generation to this system and bludgeoning your self-worth to be successful. And then it's very different when she talks about women because we get Mother Mary, China White, and Peaches and Cream. So the expectations pretty clearly are virginity, purity, objectification, and domesticity. So in large part, lyrically, Professional Widow is sort of this grimy, uncomfortable portrait of what it means to meet the expectations of a nuclear family and the associated gender roles, and how those roles and expectations might not just be limiting, but also morally questionable. Track number 5 is Mr. Zebra, and track number 6 is Marianne.
Hello, Mr. Zebra. Can I have your sweater? Gratitude, we struck a nine. Sometimes she's a friend of mine with a gigantic whirlpool that will blow your mind. Right into some confusion with a Mrs. Crocodile, dial, dial. Figure it out, she's a good damn fella. She got a little fun to fight for money, pennies,
I love the horns. Oh, is that the whole track? Wow, that was awesome.
And I said, not a chance. Girls, ladies, babes were back to say she was so pretty. Why did she crawl down in a deep ravine? 'Cause it is watching my every sound. I said,
The strings are just perfect.
just having thoughts of Marianne, quickest girl in the frying pan.
Just amazing. So it feels to me like Professional Widow was somewhat of a turn in the perspective of the album, because before we were mostly criticizing patriarchy in general, and especially with respect to men, but now we're talking more about women on these songs. And on Mr. Zebra, we have a woman putting strychnine, which Google tells me is a poison in the ratatouille. Someone alert Remy. And later we meet Mrs. Crocodile, and of course, a crocodile is a predator and a zebra is its prey. So the power dynamic that Tori set up on earlier songs with men being aggressors has flipped. And she expands on this when she says, "She's a good time fella, she got a little fun to fight for Moneypenny's rights." This woman on Mr. Zebra basically takes on the role of a playboy and adopts the sort of economic and sexual dimensions of masculinity to rise to the top of the food chain. But just like I talked about in my analysis of Madonna's Bad Girl music video a few weeks ago, this character in adopting masculinity has also taken on toxicity. And for all the fun she's having as this playboy, playgirl sort of character, she's also causing harm. She's a predator and she's poisonous. So it seems like the way to deal with the power imbalance created by gender roles isn't for women to act more masculine. Maybe there's some other kind of solution that doesn't require also taking on this toxicity. And then we have a different sort of situation on Marianne where, we have this character of Marianne who is this girl who has fallen victim to this world. On the first verse, Tori says, "Tuna, rubber, a little blubber in my igloo." Tori is in this Arctic landscape and she has got this food to eat and this blubber to keep her warm. She's protected from the harshness of this winter world, right? Then she turns her attention to Marianne, this fallen girl, and she says, "Don't you love the girls, ladies, babes, old bags who say she was so pretty? Why did she crawl in the old deep ravine?" All these other women envied Marianne for her beauty, but she still fell into this ravine, which I'm going to interpret as representing despair. And I think it also ties back to Mr. Zebra, where Tori mentioned herself being in a hole as well. And because Tori explicitly says that, Marianne didn't kill herself like everyone assumes she did, I'm going to assume that it was the harshness of the world that killed her. Tori explains this a bit more when she says, "They're watching my every sound." Tori's expression is being monitored. They, the outside world, are pushing in on the way that Tori expresses herself, her way of resisting the forces against her. And then at the end of the song, the temperature changes. We go from cold to hot when Tori says that Marianne was the quickest girl in the frying pan. There's been this motif of running or escaping, basically, I think, as a metaphor for succeeding in life and asserting yourself. And even though Marianne, within this metaphor, was the quickest girl, she still was burned, just like Mrs. Crocodile tried to succeed within this patriarchal system, this masculinist system, and ended up hurting people. So between these two different approaches, it's starting to feel like there's really no escape. Track number 7 is Caught a Light Sneeze, and track number 8 is Muhammad My Friend. I love the anguish in her vocal performance on this song.
Right on time, you get closer and closer. Maybe she will. I said, oh, maybe she will. Caught like snakes.
Amazing.
Couldn't stand it out. Mr. St. John, just bring your son. Mohammed, my friend, it's time to tell the world. We both know it was a girl back in Bethlehem. She was crucified. She was a Seder red, and we drank tea by her side. Sweet, sweet, used to be so sweet to me. Well, I'm getting very scared. Teach me how to love my brothers who don't know the law. But honey, do drop in, I did do drop in. I said, sweet, sweet. Between the boys and the bees, sweet, sweet, sweet. But you never seem fine until you've seen a Pele blow. We both know it was a gift back in Bethlehem.
Okay. So beyond, of course, being lyrically provocative, the composition and the instrumentation are just so interesting, especially that last bridge. So Caught a Light Sneeze explores the ideas from Professional Widow a bit more, except this time it's from a first-person perspective, so it's a bit more emotional and less clinical. Whereas Professional Widow was almost like an omniscient Tori commenting generally on, nuclear families, on Caught a Light Sneeze, it's about the relationship that she is in, so she approaches those same topics with a bit more nuance and sensitivity. On the chorus, she says, tumbling down, didn't know our love was so small. On Father Lucifer, going down, as in, damnation or just physically, represented basically succumbing to the pressures of a patriarchal world, and on this song, the love in this relationship isn't strong enough to withstand those forces. And a detail that stands out to me is on the pre-chorus when she says, I need a big loan from the girl zone. On Professional Widow, notably masculinity was tied to economic success, but here Tori is seeking out that same sort of financial stability in girlhood or womanhood. I mean, clearly she can't depend on her partner, right? She says that she's surrounded by boys and he's not there. So just like I said, there might be an alternate route towards fulfillment within or outside of the patriarchal system. Tori maybe is finding that in femininity. And then on Muhammad, my friend, Tori explores an idea that she brought up on Father Lucifer, which is that maybe religion enforces or at least reflects a patriarchal worldview by centering around men. So in the song, she says, what if Jesus were a woman? What if we sanctified women the same way we sanctify men? I think this also ties back to the song God from Under the Pink, where she said, if God is masculine, maybe he needs a feminine counterpart. So in the chorus, she, I think, is talking about women when she says, sweet between the boys and the bees, a riff, of course, on, the birds and the bees, a euphemism for sex. It seems like she's implying that women are expected to be docile and sensual, but also coy, just like that euphemism. But on the bridge, we have a reference to the title of the album when she says, you've never seen fire until you've seen Pele blow. Pele is the Hawaiian goddess of fire, so in that way she can be seen to represent feminine power. There's also something to Muhammad, my friend, about a sort of east-west dichotomy where maybe Western faiths are less likely to imagine femininity as powerful, but generally Tori is saying that we should expand our ideas of sacredness and power to include women. Track 9 is Hey Jupiter and track 10 is Way Down.
No one's picking up the phone, 'cause it's me and me. Hey Jupiter, nothing's been the same, so are you gay? Are you blue? Thought we both could use a friend to run to. Sometimes I breathe you in, and I know you know. And sometimes you take a swim, found your writing on my wall. Guess I thought I could never feel the things I'm feeling. I hate Jupiter. Maybe I'm the afterglow, 'cause I'm with a band, Yes, I am the anchorman, dining here with Son of Sam. And I made a great big star, gonna drive his great big car way down, way down.
Wow.
Way down, way down, she knows.
Wow. I love the introduction of the choir. That was totally gorgeous. So on Hey Jupiter, Tori kind of reached this sort of emotional low point, and what's interesting to me is that when Tori is more emotionally vulnerable, her lyrics sort of move from this place of being sort of clinical and observant and sardonic to being sort of softer and more immediate. It feels to me like Jupiter is the partner from this relationship on Caudalight's knees, the relationship that of course didn't work out. She of course mentions the apocalypse, which is a big catastrophic ending, like a breakup. And she also says that they both need a friend to run to, but it's unclear whether they are that person for each other. If they can't run from the world's ills together, if they can't escape and overcome together, then they need to head their separate ways. And then Way Down circles back to this economics motif and to the motif of down, meaning farther from God or farther from fulfillment. She says, I am the anchor man, and then later she says, gonna meet a great big star, gonna drive his great big car, gonna have it all here on the way down. When Tori says that she's the anchor man, it's sort of like Mrs. Crocodile taking on these masculine traits to assert herself. But of course, just like it led Mrs. Crocodile to be destructive, here Tori says that she's going to have it all on the way down. And since down before was associated with heaven and hell, to me it feels like she's talking about a sort of spiritual destruction. So how this reads to me is that this sort of entangling of patriarchy and capitalism is destructive, and in her moment of weakness and vulnerability following the situation with her breakup on Hey Jupiter, she finds herself enticed by it. Track number 11 is Little Amsterdam, and track number 12 is Tallulah.
Little Amsterdam in a southern town. Mama, it was my bullet. Take me back to the rain. I'm just coming out of the cell in the rain. Don't take me back to the range. She loved a brown man. Then she built a bridge in the sheriff's side. Back to the range. 'Cause you've got to know these days. There's something you've got to know these days. Little Amsterdam, with Mama, it wasn't my bullet. Congratulate you. Said you had a double tongue. Tallulah, Tallulah, you don't want to lose it. She must be worth losing if it is worth something. Goodbye, and my baby, gotta go. Say goodbye, my baby, to the old world. Run into the henchman that silver down the ooh. He did it right quickly, a merciful man. She's brand new like you. Wrapped in your papoose, you little fig Newton. Marianne, said what you want is in the blood, a sanitize. The kid too much for the money, better know right now. Only that it's in God's hands, but I don't know who the father is. You little fig Newton.
Very, very cool. So on Little Amsterdam, the song about the little town whose little fault lines cause little earthquakes, Tori incorporates some of the motifs of westerns. On the first verse, Tori sets up this small town life and has this classic outlaw country type line, "Mama, it wasn't my bullet." And on the chorus, Tori begs not to be taken back to the range, presumably like home on the range, a sort of provincial life, or could even be the shooting range. So with these outlaw country tropes, we have Tori sort of reinterpreting this motif of her running from something. And on the second verse, Tori talks about how her mother loved a brown man, then she built a bridge in the sheriff's bed, she'd do anything to save her man. Whereas Tori runs, her mother does not. Presumably living in this provincial town, she would have been in danger being in this interracial relationship, so she used sex to protect her love. So we have these two approaches to womanhood represented by Tori and her mother. Tori fights back, but then she is always on the run, but her mother works within the system but has to sacrifice her self-worth to the power that these men have over her. Again, these differing approaches to womanhood ultimately show that no one really wins, but it also adds this dimension of race to add sort of another element of injustice. And then we get to Tallulah, which admittedly just has too many great little lyrical nuggets for me to explore, so I'm just going to hit some major points. One important thing is that Tallulah, this representative woman, is described as a fig Newton, a type of cookie. This to me brings to mind the beanbag from the opener, a useful item, something disposable and replaceable. Again, it's an image of objectification, just like the jeans on Silent All These Years. And the same goes for Tori's reference to Anne Boleyn, a wife of Henry VIII who notoriously executed and replaced his wives. Notably, he was a king, a powerful man. But this is all in the past, right? You know, monarchies are so passé. But then Tori talks about senators, which of course have existed for centuries, but are, you know, pretty relevant, of course, to her living in the US. And she brought up congressmen on Professional Widow, so we have this past-present connection that tells us that these abuses of power by men have persisted for this long. Or more generally, we have this persisting culture of subjugating and objectifying women. Track number 13 is Not the Red Baron, and track number 14 is Agent Orange.
Taking them into the flames, taking them into the flames.
The boys for Pele, the sacrifices to the fire.
I see that screen go down in the flames with not anyone I really know. Just another pilot down. Many there know some girls with red ribbons, the prettiest red ribbon.
Wow. For one of the simpler songs on the album, it's also one of the most powerful.
Gotta tell you what I heard from Agent Orange, and they don't understand. He's got palm oil fans. He's getting to be there underwater city where she swims and swims.
I love these brief tracks. They add a lot of color to the album, a lot of variety, and she can sort of experiment without having the sort of confines of a conventional song structure. Okay, on the first verse of Not the Red Baron, Tori talks about these men, these pilots being led into the flames. Again, another sort of oblique reference to Pele. The titular Red Baron was, of course, a fighter pilot, but in the context of the Peanuts, because of course she mentions Charlie Brown, this was sort of Snoopy's alter ego. He would get up on his red doghouse, put on goggles and a scarf, and, you know, pretend to be this fighter pilot. So by actually describing the deaths of these fighter pilots, Tori sort of unravels the full extent of the darkness underlying this otherwise kind of innocent cartoon image. Later she says something along the lines of, you know, these aren't any people that I know personally, it's not a big deal. And then she also talks about a screen going down in flames. And then also we have these sort of radio transmissions that could either, I guess, be, you know, a radio frequency in like a wartime and the broadcasting of war stories on the radio historically. And together, all of these images tell me that romanticizing war and violence ultimately can be destructive. And then, of course, she extends this idea on Agent Orange because, the title of the song refers to a chemical weapon used in the Vietnam War. Of course, Tori personifies Agent Orange as another one of these high roller type characters. And she clarifies the source of his orangeness when she calls him Mr. Suntan, which to me was eerily prescient, but I guess fake tan was in vogue among the rich in the 90s as well. And basically she lists off these things that make him so impressive to an increasingly ridiculous effect, which culminates in when she says he's got an A to Z, an underwater city where she swims and swims. And I think she mentioned earlier on the album this idea of women drowning basically as an image of them succumbing to the pressures of the patriarchal world. So again, this man's success goes hand in hand with a woman's suffering. In fact, she's not even named on this song. She's yet another anonymous, replaceable woman at the mercy of a powerful man. Track number 15 is Donut Song, and track number 16 is In the Springtime of His Voodoo.
Hand me a drink and a kick in your massage. You'll never gain weight from a donut at all. There's no one here, dear, no one at all. And if I'm wasting all your time this time, maybe you never learn to take how someone can grow cool, can grow pretty. Let's you in, let's you in. And if I'm hanging on to your shade, I guess I'm way beyond repair. You were a son now, with your very own devoted satellite. Yes, you've been wasting my time this time. You'll never gain weight from a donut hole. Hey, yes, hey, play. Well, let me watch you, yeah. Standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona, and I'm quite sure I'm in the wrong song. 265, got a piece tied up in the backseat of Hollywood, becoming Christians. Right there for a minute, I knew you so. In the springtime of his voodoo. You gotta check it out sometimes when you're the sweetest cherry in an apple pie. He was going to show me spring.
Okay, wow. Definitely up there in weirdness with Professional Widow, but also definitely a standout. So on the first verse of Donut Song, Tori describes herself basically as empty. She says, "You'll never gain weight from a donut hole," and later, "There's no one here, dear, no one at all." She is negative space. She is empty. But that also means that she won't be a burden. She won't take up space in anyone's life or, stomach. So in a similar sort of self-effacing way, on the chorus, she seems preoccupied that she is wasting her partner's time. Again, sort of like in the breakup song, sort of headspace. And then later, after this presumed breakup, her ex tells her that he has now become a sun with a satellite. As a man, he wants to be the center of the universe, and he has found someone who will treat him that way. Also, this might be silly, but I'm thinking about the shape of a donut, And the whole, of course, is at the center. So maybe Tori didn't fulfill this role because her natural space is at the center of attention or of a relationship. She won't be a satellite. And then on in the springtime of his Voodoo, Tori ties back to Blood Roses to explore some ideas of women's sexual fulfillment. Springtime and flowers, like I've said, are images of growing and, for lack of a better word, blossoming. Tori says on the first verse, "Two girls, 65, got a piece tied up in the back seat. Honey, we're recovering Christians." I'm guessing that 65 refers to their age, so it's kind of odd to be calling them girls, right? She's saying that women, this far into their lives are finally fighting back and overcoming this stigma placed on them by their religious upbringing, and it sounds like they've got this guy tied up in the back of their car, and that's their act of resistance. Because peace can refer to, as in side piece, a romantic interest, especially one that's illicit. So the title of the song refers not only to a change in seasons, as in, growing up and maturing, but also to a change in faiths from Christianity to Voodoo, which maybe, to Tori and these women is more liberating. This also might explain the musical tension between the appearance of what sounds like a gospel organ and then these sort of freer, more soul and jazz influenced sounds. So when Tori talks about, following this road back to her door, she's talking about following her instincts and not repressing them. She's no longer running from something, but towards something. Track 17 is Putting the Damage On, and the final track, track 18, is Twinkle.
Glue stuck to my shoes. Does anyone know why you play with an orange right? Now I'm wishing for my best impression of my best Dickinson. You still look pretty when you're putting the damage on. Make me scratch on you, do pretty when you're putting the damage on. Said I'm trying not to move, your ghost passing through when you putting the damage on.
Sort of reminds me of Does Not Suffice by Joanna Newsom about, even when you are, emptying someone else's house of your things, there's still a part of you that stays with them.
Sure, that star can twinkle. I know a girl twice as high, gonna twinkle, gonna twinkle, gonna twinkle. She said I killed a manatee. I've gotta stay hidden. I sure can. So hard, so hard.
Wow. And that is how the album ends. So Putting the Damage On sounds like an extension of Donut Song, with Tori having just ended this relationship or, having just been broken up with and wanting to be back in the relationship and struggling with that feeling. She says she's got glue on her shoes. She is stuck in place and can't move on. She says that her ex is playing with an orange rind. The fruits of their love have been consumed and all that's left is the bitter peel. And now she says, I think of her ex's new girlfriend. Her skinny legs could use some sun. This feels like that same sort of impulse to tear other women down that she's been fighting, on prior albums as well. well. And she knows that this is coming from a place of desperation. She says, "Don't make me scratch on your door." She's like a dog that's been locked outside. She just wants back in. She even settles on the bridge for, either being a ghost passing through or having the ghost of this relationship pass through. Even after the relationship has ended, she has that same sort of sense of emptiness, of empty space that she did when she was in the relationship. She's so desperate that she says, "You look so pretty even when you're putting the damage on, even when you're hurting me." She knows intellectually that these gendered power dynamics were part of the reason that this relationship ended, but emotionally, she knows that she still wants it. And then Twinkle ends the album by combining all of these situations from songs like Tallulah and Way Down and even Past the Mission by, talking about this friend of Tori's who has tried to be an ambitious woman and in doing so has killed a man. Tori says that this friend of hers is ambitious just like a man in that she watches the stars. This can tie back to a few places earlier where Tori talks about stars, both literal and figurative, and to her ex becoming a sun. And as a result of that, this friend has killed someone, much in the same vein as Mrs. Crocodile. So once again, there is no way out of patriarchy. The expression, "if you can't beat 'em, join 'em"? Well, on this album, there's no way of beating patriarchy, but there are two ways of joining it: a masculine way or a feminine way. And this is what we saw on Little Amsterdam. If you work the system in a feminine way, then you sacrifice your agency. But then if you're a woman and you try to be masculine, then you end up also maybe being toxic and end up being a woman on the run, just like Tori or her friend on this song. So we leave Tori and the other women in her life still on the run from, still struggling with this system in which they can't win. Overall, this was another fantastic album from Tori. I honestly don't know where it falls among the three that I have listened to so far because I think they've been really consistent and consistently amazing. Same goes for choosing a favorite song, but I do actually especially like the more somber moments on this album. They feel a bit more vulnerable and less sort of observant and knowing. And I think the moments that open up in that way feel more concrete and even more convincing about these ideas of gender. Lyrically, melodically, instrumentally, every aspect of this album is just masterful. So thank you so much to all of you who recommended that I listen to this album. As always, let me know in the comments down below what music I should react to next and what other topics you'd like to see me cover on my channel. Check the description for that donation link. Please subscribe to be here when I post new videos every week. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you are staying safe and healthy in the new year. And until next time, that's it.